The briefcase hit the flagstone with a crack that startled a bird from the lemon tree. Sun shattered across the pool in hard little diamonds, blinding for half a second. Then the glare thinned, and he saw them, Isabel trembling on the coping, knees blanched and knobby under her sundress. Maya half in, half out of the water, hair plastered to her cheeks. Lips edged blue as she coughed and coughed again. One arm still around the child's shins as if refusing to let go even on dry land. Isabel. Gregory was already moving. Shoes slipping on wet stone, breath coming in a tight hiss. He pulled his daughter away from the edge and dropped to a knee, hands skimming for damage. Sweetheart, where does it hurt? Can you breathe? Look at me. I'm okay, Daddy. The words were small and galloped with air. I fell. Miss Maya. A cough broke the sentence. She saved me. He heard the first part and not the rest. Or perhaps the rest ricocheted off the iron caves that fear welded around his ears. He turned his head to the woman on the tiles. You were supposed to be watching her. Maya pushed up on her palms. Water ran down her sleeves and dripped from her chin in neat beads. She was playing with her doll. She said, voice rough, breath shallow. She leaned afar. There wasn't time. You don't throw yourself in like a maniac. He snapped, the volume surprising even himself. What if you both drowned? Her shoulders flinched. She swallowed and coughed again, a tearing sound. I'm not a strong swimmer. She steadied her tone, but she went under. I could see there wasn't time to call. The world narrowed to Isabel's face, the white scallop of her lower lip. He found no blood, no broken skin. The throb of adrenaline began its messy retreat, and Shane tried to rise with it, hot and unwelcome. He strangled both. Inside, he said to his daughter, warm clothes, now. To Maya, without looking, change and stay out of sight. Until I say otherwise. Isabel's fingers clutched his sleeve. Daddy, please don't be mad. She go, he said, softer, and kissed her damp hair. She slid away on wet feet, glancing back once at Maya, who offered a small, shaky smile no one had earned. He stood and finally let himself see the rest of the ring of water darkening. The stone, the dish towel abandoned mid-fold on a chair. The staff members frozen near the patio doors pretending not to stare. Hierarchy settling on their faces like dust. Javier's shadow fell across the threshold. Sir, the head groundskeeper said, not meeting his eyes. Couple of vans up on the road. News folks. Might be nothing. Of course it wouldn't be nothing. Nothing never parked with a dish of satellite on its back and waited. Keep them away from the gate, Gregory said. No comment. Maya was still kneeling. She had wrapped her arms around herself, and the tremor in her hands wasn't only cold. He forced his gaze past her, back to the pool. The water was already smoothing itself back into an innocent mirror. He hated it then the ease with which it forgot. Get a towel. He told no one and everyone, and someone rushed to obey. He followed Isabel inside, overtaking her in the hallway where the air smelled like coffee and lemon oil. He set her on a bench by the mudroom and peeled her dress from her shoulders. With the care of opening a fragile letter, that was when he saw it, a faint, uncanny halo of bruising high on her left shoulder. The skin kissed purple in a circle. What's this? His voice dropped into something that made her blink. It hurt. She whispered, surprised by the memory even as she spoke it. Like I got pulled. By what? She shook her head and shivered, the motion setting her teeth softly together. I don't know. A towel arrived. He wrapped her tight and scooped her up, the way he hadn't in the lawn, carrying her down the hall toward the bedroom wing. Behind them, Maya's cough flared again, a scraping echo. He didn't turn. That emission crawled into him and sat. By evening the house had settled into a quiet. That wasn't peace. Isabel dozed on the sofa with a heat pack on her shoulder and a penguin tucked under her arm. Rose a brewed tea that no one finished. From the kitchen office, Gregory signed a terse email to legal about trespass and media and placed one to security about perimeter scans and the non-standard maintenance he suddenly wanted to know everything about. When Maya came to the doorway, dry clothes and damp hair, he felt the staff's attention tilt toward the threshold and hold. She didn't cross into the room. Is she all right? She asked, voice softer now but steady. She's fine. He watched himself choose a smaller truth. Go rest. We'll talk tomorrow. She nodded. That should have been the end of it. Instead, she turned her head, not toward him, but toward the couch. Good night, Isabel, she said, and the girl, eyes closed, mumbled back, "Good night, Maya," and tucked the penguin closer as if to seal the exchange. Later, when the lights were low and the clatter of dishes in the back kitchen had dwindled to isolated taps, he sat alone in his study with the security console blinking a constellation's worth of little green assurances. He pulled up the backyard camera and scrubbed the timeline back with his thumb until the sun returned to the water and the soundless recording made everything look polite. It wasn't polite. He watched Isabel at the edge, the doll's dress, trailing in the blue. He watched the slip. No splashy comedy of errors, no screaming, just a small body tipping past balance and a clean, terrible disappearance. The dish towel flickered in the corner, then Maya, a smear of motion, running, not even a glance at her shoes. He paused the frame as her toes left the coping, body knife toward the water, arms out, no hesitation at all. His jaw tightened until it ached. He hit play. In the magnified grain, he saw her go under with the child, saw her head vanish for a count of 1.5, then break the surface and shove Isabel up. Fingers clawing for purchase on the slick tile. He watched her slip again, fought for breath in his own throat when she didn't take one. He watched her choose the kid's air over her own every time. On the next pause, he caught his reflection faint in the glass overlay. A man with a suit coat on a chair, and something like a flinch trap between his eyes. He drew a long breath, through his nose, let it out more slowly than the first, and rewound the last 3 seconds. The water exploded. The diamonds went to dust. The woman who worked in his house didn't even look down to see if the pool would keep her. Somewhere beyond the door, a phone buzzed with a message about the vans on the road. He ignored it. The camera image waited for him, still as a confession. He tapped his finger against the desk, once, twice, then again, and could not decide which was louder in the room, the sound of his own fear or the sudden shape of his mistake. Morning seeped into the kitchen as if it didn't trust the house. The espresso machine hissed and then went quiet, leaving a heavy hush that smelled like lemon oil and cooling toast. Maya stood at the stove in a gray sweatshirt, hair braided back, ladling oatmeal into a bowl with a focus that said everything hurts less when your hands are busy. Her cough had faded to a ghost of itself. The tremor in her fingers had not. Gregory paused at the doorway, the apology barking in his throat like a skittish horse. He had spent half the night in the blue glow of the monitor, replaying the footage until the narrative he'd built collapsed under a single, unforgiving angle. He had also spent it remembering the tiny purple ring blooming on his daughter's shoulder and the way she breathed the word pulled like a question. He had been a man who believed in facts. Last night, the facts made a fool of him. "You don't have to make breakfast," he said, uselessly, because the bowl was already in her hands and the tray already set. Toast triangles, a boiled egg, with a crack like a white river across its shell, orange juice without pulp. "It's her routine," Maya said without looking up. "Routines make kids feel safe." He nodded as if that wisdom belonged to him. When she set the spoon down and finally faced him, he saw the purple under her eyes and the rawness along her knuckles and felt, for a second, like the smallest man in a very large room. "I watched the security footage," he managed. "I owe you an apology." Her chin lifted a fraction. She said nothing, not out of defiance, but permission. "Go on. Say the part that costs." "I was wrong," he said, and it scratched his throat coming out. "About yesterday, about you. I saw fear and called it recklessness. Thank you for saving my daughter." He waited for the relief that was supposed to come after the words. It didn't. Something heavier unhooked from his ribs and slid lower. She studied him for a beat to long for comfort. "I didn't do it to be thanked," she said, voice steady. "But I hear you, and the swimming." I said, "I'm not a strong swimmer," she answered, and the trace of steel, there was a mercy. "There's a difference." From the hallway, footfalls tapped, light as pencils on a desk. Isabel patted in, hair and nest from sleep, penguin tucked under one arm. She took in the room in one swift blink, then beamed at Maya as if they had a code. "I made your favorite," Maya said. "The way you talk to a person and not a task." "Sit." Isabel slid onto a chair. "Can Maya eat with me?" she asked, turning to her father like a judge at a hearing. "She has a lot to." Gregory stopped himself. The sentence sounded like the old house. "If she wants to." "I want to," Maya said, and sat. For 3 minutes and a lifetime, they ate in a small human circle, the kind that looks like nothing from outside. Oatmeal, toast, the careful avoidance of the bruised shoulder, when the spoon clinked to a halt. Isabel leaned closer to Maya and whispered as if conspirators might be listening. "Last night I dreamed the stars were eyes," she said, "watching. So I wouldn't slide back in. The stars are your grandma's spies," Maya said, smiling. "They don't miss much." Gregory watched that exchange and felt something complicated happen behind his ribs. A tenderness that threatened to become a choice. Javier appeared in the doorway, hat in hand, gaze pinned to a safe middle distance. "Sir," he said, "Rose. Busy. 2 vans still out there, and a blogger local one posted a blind item about a domestic incident at a Napa state pool. No names." He crawled up Gregory's neck. The story should not be leaving his property already. He swallowed, the old instinct to clamp down harder, and instead looked at both of them, one by one. "Finish breakfast," he told Isabel, gentler. "Maya, after you've eaten, could you meet me by the pool?" The water had returned to its glass face by the time they stepped outside. The sun sat on it like a cat, pretending innocence. Gregory knelt near the shallow end and ran his hand along the coping, then under the first rung of the ladder, then under the light housing. He wanted to find nothing so he could go back to the version of the world where accidents happened, because the universe didn't care enough to aim them. Instead, his fingertips struck something that didn't belong. He pinched and drew out a tiny coin-shaped disc from a groove where stone met metal, its casing dull and ridged, its history of use written in a scratch no one would ever read. "Battery," he said. "Coin cell. From what?" He said it in his palm. It looked trivial and malignant. Maya crouched. "I found one in my mother's med alert years ago," she said. "Small power for small tasks." "Which tasks would you run by a pool?" His voice went careful. "A man building a bridge." As he walked it, "Light timers," she said. "Sensors, or anything someone wanted powered without a cord." She glanced at the water. She said it felt like a pull. The word hung between them, somewhere behind the hedges. A camera shutter clicked as if to prove it. Javier's radio hissed. The world was coming for a story. Stories did not begin with coin batteries hidden in seams. Gregory pocketed the disc. "I'm calling the pool company," he said, and made himself say the honest part too, "and the police." Quietly. "Quiet doesn't stay quiet," Maya said, not cynical. "True." He looked at her, really looked, past the sweatshirt and the braid and the stain drying at her cuff, to the steadiness she wore like a uniform no one paid for. "Then we'll be precise," he said. "We'll be the people who know what happened." She nodded once. "Start with what changed." "Changed from the last week to this one," she said, rolling up a sleeve and reaching for the skimmer basket net as if work could keep the worst at bay. Deliveries, repairs, visitors, passwords, schedules. Something shifted. He thought of his calendar like a stack of bricks, meetings, a dinner he hadn't stayed for, a maintenance log he never read because other people read those and told him the house was sound. He also thought of his late wife's neat handwriting in notebooks he avoided, because at some point grief had turned his eyes and the thieves died inside. His phone vibrated on his desk. He imagined the screen. 3 messages from legal, 1 from PR, a headline prompt from a national outlet, patient as a hawk. "Finish here," he said. "I'll pull the invoices." He took the steps toward the door and stopped. It felt important not to leave the words unsaid. "When I told you to stay out of sight, that was me trying to put my fear somewhere it didn't belong. I won't make that mistake again." Maya's hand still on the net. She didn't look up right away. When she did, there was a flicker of something almost like relief and almost like warning. "Then don't," she said. By late afternoon, the house looked like itself and didn't. The cook hummed while chopping thyme. A delivery man signed for a case of wine and pretended he didn't know where he was. Isabel napped under a cotton blanket in the den with a book open to a page about a bear and a sky full of dots. Gregory sat in his study with invoices spread like a new language. He circled dates, underlined names, drew arrows with the blunt end of a pen until a pattern began to whisper from the mess. A service call log for the pool lights 3 days ago. Signed off by someone he didn't recognize. A filter inspection. Out of cycle. The blog post refreshed itself on a second screen as if to taunt him with the speed of rumor. Rosa knocked and brought tea that he let go cold. When twilight thickened and made the windows into mirrors, he pushed back from the desk and did a thing he hadn't done in months. He joined his daughter at bedtime. She curled close while he read, voice low, words smooth in the air. The little bear asked terrible questions in gentle sentences. And he answered with a mother's line he had never spoken out loud. Because the stars will still be shining. And that's me looking down at you. Isabel smiled in that heavy-lidded way of children who know safety for this 1 minute and take it in the hall. Maya waited with a folded blanket and a look that made him think of Bridges again. She'll sleep, she said. He nodded. So will I. It wasn't true, but the laugh felt like a prayer. Night fell like a door quietly shut. Alone in the study, he pulled the footage up again. Thumb on the scrub, index finger hovering over pause. The cursor slid, the pull sparkled, and then betrayed. He froze the frame at the instant before Maya's feet left stone, at the bare courage of it. And the glass of the monitor returned to him a man who hadn't yet decided who he wanted to be. His phone buzzed. On the lock screen, a local blogger had posted an update. Private sources confirm a heroic save by a member of household staff. Developing? He stared until the words blurred, and the battery icon at the corner of the phone mocked him for its tidiness. A small silver circle that could power a light, a sensor, a problem. He set the phone face down, pressed his palms to the desk until bone found wood, and finally let the flinch become a vow. Night taught the house new sounds. The refrigerator's low hum grew teeth. Old floorboards spoke to each other in whispers. Round 11. The rain that hadn't come all summer finally threatened at the edges of the sky. Maya lay on her back, in the narrow bed of the staff wing, counting exhale after exhale. The way the clinic nurse once taught her to trick the body into sleep. It didn't work. In her head the pool kept replaying, not the splash, but the quiet Isabel small body vanishing without a ripple big enough to bring anyone running. She swung her legs over the side and tugged on a sweatshirt. The corridor smelled faintly of bleach and lemon oil. A single sconce burned at half strength. Down the hall, a shadow crossed the seam of light under the study door. Not fast, not cautious. Purposeful. Maya's feet went cold and then, just as quickly, steady, she patted forward, flattening her palm against the wall to feel for vibration before the corner. Another shadow, a shoulder this time, slid across the rectangle of light. On the floor, she eased the door open 2 inches and looked through. Alicia stood at the desk with the upper drawers open, her hair scraped back tight, her mouth set. She didn't rifle. She sorted, fingers on folders. A quick flick of eyes to labels as if she'd read them a dozen times already. She opened the bottom drawer and pulled out a leather folder Gregory almost never used. The light caught the raised seal, Isabel's trust. Alicia flipped through and stopped on an envelope, thin and official looking, the kind that would fold too easily and change the shape of a life. Her hand trembled once and then went still. She slid it into her coat pocket like it belonged there. Maya stepped in. "What are you doing?" Alicia whirled, and for one honest heartbeat, her face broke into panic. Then she found a sneer and slipped it on. "Looking for my pay stubs," she said. "You know, since I work here, not in the owner's private drawer at midnight." Maya kept her voice level. "Give me the envelope. Who do you think you are?" Alicia took a step closer, chin high, eyes flicking to the hallway like she could outrun the fact of the room. "You're a maid with a cold and a hero complex. You think saving a kid once makes you family?" Maya didn't retreat. "I think taking what isn't yours makes this simple. If you hand it over, I'll walk you out. If you don't, you can hand it to Mr. Langston with an apology." "Apology?" Alicia let out a laugh that held too much history to be about tonight. "Apologies are for people the cameras care about." "What cameras?" The question left Maya before she could catch it. "The ones pointed at this house," Alicia said. "You really haven't noticed, have you? You're not being lifted up, you're being used up." She cocked her head, something feral in her look now. "And when they're done with their story, you'll be back where you started, only with less enough." Gregory's voice filled the doorway behind Maya, low and iron. He stepped in wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt, sleep ending in his eyes like a door interrupted mid-close, put the envelope on the desk. Alicia froze, gauging angles. Then she reached into her coat, pulled it out, and slapped it onto the blotter. She didn't flinch when he opened it, scanned it, set it down. She did flinch when he looked up and said, almost softly, "Javier will walk you off the property. You won't return. If you fire me, I talk." Her smile was small and mean, and talking pays. "About what?" Gregory asked, not because he believed her, but because a man who lives in storms learns to name the direction of the wind. "About the maid who sleeps where she shouldn't," Alicia said. "About why a widower keeps the help so close. About your books. Go," he said. No shout, no threat, just a door closing under his tone. He waited until Javier's footsteps faded before he exhaled and sat. The leather of the chair creaked. Like a living thing, Maya stood still, hands by her sides, feeling the adrenaline leave her too slowly, a tide reluctant to give back the shore. He picked up the envelope again and laid it flat. It wasn't empty, not trust schedules, a dated memo about security procedures for the pool and the grounds, countersigned 3 days before. A maintenance log stapled to a service authorization with a signature that wasn't his. He traced it with his thumb. She wasn't looking for gossip, Maya said. She knew where to reach. She wasn't alone. He answered. Someone taught her which drawer mattered. He dragged a hand over his face, then looked up at Maya and, for the first time since the pool, let the full weight of gratitude show. You were right to intervene. I didn't do it to be right. She glanced toward the window, where the rose garden was a darker black against the night. Something else is wrong. They carried the envelope with them out to the patio. The pool sat in its glass quiet. The vineyard breathed a damp, anticipatory cold. Beyond the flagstones, Marissa's rose trellis stood like a line of lanterns gone dark. Maya walked the dirt lip at the bed's edge and crouched where the first trellis post dug into the soil, a glint in the roots of the nearest bush caught. Her eye metal where no metal should be. She brushed earth away with her fingers until the shape showed itself. A compact bolt with a ridged back and a wireless stub no bigger than a thumbnail. Don't touch the leads, Gregory said quickly, kneeling beside her. He cupped his hand around the thing, not lifting it. A soft green lead woke at the heat of skin. They were listening. To us, the idea slotted into place with a sick click. The blind item. The vans. The way the story kept leaping fences. It shouldn't have cleared. To everything anyone said out here, he answered. This is where we stand when we don't think we're being watched. Maya sat back on her heels and rubbed soil into her palms to ground herself. Her eyes moved over the garden as if it had become a map of markings she'd never learned to read. She loved this place, she said. Rosa told me, tea on Sundays. She'd walk the rows with you. He nodded, and something flickered behind his eyes that wasn't anger. I stopped coming here after she died. Couldn't stand how I kept remembering. He reached toward the trellis beam, then stopped and looked at Maya instead. I need to check her desk. They crossed the hall by way of the kitchen, where Rosa pretended not to see them at a tactic both kind and old. In the dressing room, the air still held a ghost of lavender. He opened a drawer he had left closed for a year, and the soft slide of what felt like a betrayal and a blessing. Inside, scarves folded into careful thirds, a little box of buttons, a notebook bound in weathered leather. He lifted it and winced at the weight of memory. On the first page, in Marissa's tidy hand, dates, simple lists, a recipe for apricot jam, a quotation about mercy. Halfway through, he found her, not in a photograph, in a sentence she had written to herself in a margin next to nothing important at all. If the truth gets heavy, look to the roses. He held the book toward Maya, who read and felt the scan along. Her arms rise as if the ink were cold. She knew, Maya said. She saw something coming. She always did, he said, and this time the grief didn't close his throat. It opened it. I just didn't want to follow. They called. The detective after midnight. The woman's voice came through the speaker with the composure of someone who sleeps with one boot on. Remove nothing. Touch as little as possible, she said. We'll be there before dawn. They didn't sleep. They sat at the kitchen table with mugs of tea they didn't drink while the house's old bones settled and the garden held its breath. At 3, the rain finally came. A little. Just enough to make the flagstones darker and the roses slick. Just enough to make every camera outside the gates worth less money for a while. By morning, a new current moved under the ordinary. Staff arrived with eyes that dipped and darted. The espresso machine hissed like a cat defending its bowl. Isabel patted in with her penguin and stopped short at the tape strung across the patio doorway and the DePlane sedans in the drive. Gregory lifted her and kissed her temple. What's wrong? She asked. We're fixing something, he said, and for once a simple sentence carried all the truth it needed. Detective Carmichael arrived in a navy raincoat and boots clean enough to have been put on at the threshold. She listened without interrupting, then crouched in the garden and worked the device out with tools meant for delicate theft. You'll want the Electronics Forensics Union on this, she told the tech. And then to Gregory, you'll want to prepare for the slow kind of siege. They like it when you tire yourself out. Maya said. from the doorway where she stood with her hands shoved into her sweatshirt pocket, as if to keep them from trembling. Not he, Carmichael's. Eyes flicked to her with a quick, measuring gratitude. She corrected and made a note. The morning stretched into a day that dressed itself like any other. Breakfast, emails, deliveries. It tricked the pulse into thinking it could stand down. Maya took Isabel to the den and reread the bear story because the child asked, and because routine is an anchor in a wind that keeps changing directions. Gregory listened from the hall until he couldn't stand the sound of his own stillness, and went back to the study to pull logs, to draw more arrows, to accuse paper. Near noon, a knock sounded at the front gate rather than the door. Javier jogged from the garage and returned with a manila envelope in a clear plastic bag, his jaw tight. Found taped to the mailbox. He said, "No stamp." Gregory slit the top. Inside, 6 black and white photographs slid into his hand in a cold cascade. 2 were of the garden. 1 from the ridge line where the fence dips. 1 from the south hedge. Then Isabel on the porch swing, a leg pumping, a book open. Maya at the mailbox with a letter in her hand, looking up at the sky the way you look up when you're trying not to look back. The last one made his fingers go numb. Isabel and Maya together on the path between the roses and the pool, laughing, as something too small for a camera to catch. The frame drawn from far enough back to make the house look like a ship. Maya stepped closer and felt her stomach drop as if an elevator cable had snapped. The photographs weren't proof of talent. They were proof of proximity. Someone had stood where the yard feels like it belongs to the family and told themselves, it belonged to them. They want us to know their distance, she said, voice even. Because there was a child in the house and even voices matter. They want us to measure how close. Gregory slid the images back into the envelope. He had made his fortune on timing and leverage and the confidence of men who could afford both. It felt like nothing he had learned there mattered now. He looked through the open doorway at the place where the water had mirrored the sky and taken a child without a sound. He looked at the roses that had held their own secret and given it back. He looked at Maya and the steel she wore under fatigue and fear. Then we stopped waiting. He said, we make them come closer than they mean to. They built the trap in daylight because daylight made lies look like paperwork. Detective Carmichael arrived with a laptop that had no stickers and eyes that missed nothing. She listened while Gregory laid out the invoices and the coin cell and the photographs and the note from the roses. And then she turned to Maya as if the room naturally pointed toward her. What would you click? Carmichael asked. If you were the person who planted that in the garden. The drawer that hums like a heart, Maya said. Trust papers. Anything that lets you move money with a signature and a bad conscience. Then we leave them a pulse, the detective said. Loud enough to hear, Gregory's lawyer protested 3 ways and then surrendered to the logic of a siege. The decoy file was crafted with care. A draft amendment referring to a temporary co-trustee appointment, and a scheduled transfer to a tame offshore holding designed to look reckless to a hungry eye. Maya's name appeared sparingly, never, as spectacle. Only where it would hum in the bones of anyone who wanted a story, a black woman from nowhere, made gatekeeper of a white child's fortune. It made Maya taste metal, but she nodded anyway. Not because of the money, the idea of it embarrassed her skin, but because a controlled light could be a lever. They seeded breadcrumbs where a mole would think they'd stumble. A cached copy in the study. Computers, recent files. A printed draft was filed under audits. A piece of lawyer correspondence accidentally emailed to the generic estate address, and then deleted but recoverable by anyone with half a hacker's patience. Gregory re-angled the external cameras. Without announcing it, Maya taped over the LEDs on the hidden night vision pinhole in the study and configured it to record silently. The west exit was configured to lock from the outside. A small bit of code in the home system that Javier knew how to toggle with a phone. The greenhouse door's glass that looked decorative had been retrofitted after a rash of wine thefts. Years ago, behind their pretty handles, hydraulic teeth sat ready by sunset. The house had the strange calm of a theater waiting for the first cue. Isabel took her penguin to Rose's room for a movie and a night of snacks, and rules softened. By kindness, it had been framed as a treat, not a retreat. Eleanor called to say she'd be up from the city tomorrow, voice low and steady, like a woman who had rebuilt herself from grief once and knew the workbench well. Gregory kissed his daughter's hair and let Rosa lock the connecting door between the family wing and the main hall. He told himself the click was protection and not distance. Maya moved through the rooms one last time. touching things she might need if the night went badly, a scarf to quiet a hinge, a length of twine in the utility drawer, a heavy flashlight that could be a signal or a truth. In the mirror over the sideboard she saw the woman she had not planned to be in this life. Eyes still awake, mouth set, a steadiness that didn't feel like cold because it came from love. When the house settled, it settled low. The garden smelled like wet soil and old perfume from a bottle no one had touched in 3 years. The vines along the lower slope made their small night sounds, leaf on leaf, a quiet applause. Gregory and Maya took seats in the security room where monitors stacked their world into rectangles. Carmichael sipped coffee that wasn't good but would do. No one talked about the time. Talking made time feel like something you could threaten. You're sure about the west exit? Maya asked if he's been here before. Gregory said, it's his muscle memory. He'll want the shadows behind those hedges and the gap in the fence that's never quite straight. It's also the longest path without crossing the camera. He glanced sideways and caught her looking at him the way someone looks when they need to decide if you belong on their team. I used to walk the property with a map in my head, he added. Then I got lazy. The map walked me. She didn't say it aloud, but she acknowledged the confession with a small lift of her chin as if to mark that. The man who owned the land knew it again. At 2:11 a.m. A motion square blinked yellow by the carriage house and then went still. At 2:28, the dining room camera registered a change in light that could have been a cloud crossing the moon. At 2:41, the utility corridor behind the wine cellar pinged awake. South service door. Carmichael said, already moving. He knows. Staff routines. He knows the dead spots. Maya said, he's done this before. On the monitor, a shape separated itself from the darker dark, a man-sized blot that moved without urgency. The camera on the basement landing picked up a shoulder, then a gloved hand. The figure paused, head angled as if listening, then slid, passed toward the study stair. He's testing us, Gregory murmured, seeing if anyone coughs. No one's coughing, Maya said, and her own lungs obeyed. They watched him into the study like a man coming home, straight to the desk, bottom drawer. The false bottom, the folder that didn't exist. He didn't rifle. He extracted. The night vision captured the long white bones of his fingers against the leather. He lifted the file with the care of a person who has felt the weight of real money and the drag of fear. He looked toward the west hallway. Now, Gregory said, and tapped his phone once. In the greenhouse. A relay arm that hadn't moved in months woke up and remembered its job. The west door's exterior lock motor engaged and turned with a quiet, merciless finality. They let him cross the hall and push through the exit. Let the handle give as promised. Let the corridor funnel him along the path that smelled like damp soil and sweet rot. Wait, Maya said when Carmichael reached for her radio. Give him 10 seconds to believe he's gone. 8. Carmichael countered. I'm not writing 10 seconds of regret on a report. She counted under her breath anyway. At the 9th heartbeat, the greenhouse door side closed. The lock and teeth bit. The lights came on inside, white and clean. The figure spun, hit the handle, hit it again, then grabbed the glass with both hands like he could lift the night and slide it somewhere else. He turned to face the door as their shapes appeared in the rectangle. Gregory in a t-shirt like a man who had left bed and never intended to go back. Maya in a dark sweater, her hair braided close for speed. Carmichael with her badge turned inward, and her hand nowhere near her holster, but her stance saying she could find it fast. Don't bother. Maya called through the glass. It's tempered, and there's nowhere to run. He ripped off the mask. For a heartbeat. The man's face was too ordinary to hold the fear he put into their walls. Then memory pushed through expression and named him. Age had tightened his cheeks and hollowed the space under his eyes, but the mouth was the same. A line that curved only when it sneered. Daniel, Gregory said, not loudly, not with triumph, like a diagnosis spoken in an office where the window faces a bright day. Daniel Reyes looked from one to the other and found his grin. You have no idea how long I've been waiting to hear you say my name, he said, his voice taking its time and dragging its feet. Carmichael's radio crackled once. Units at the south gate, came the whisper. Ready. You were warned, Daniel said. Eyes cutting to Maya. You were told not to trust the favorite. He tapped the file against his palm. A teacher with a lesson. But you like pretty stories, rescue the child, redeem the master, make it all smell like roses. He nodded toward the garden as if it belonged to him. Did you like the gift I left you there? Do you like the way the world looks when someone turns your house into a mouth? Gregory stepped forward until his reflection layered over Daniel's in the glass-doubled man. Both frightened and finished with it. Put the file down, he said. Daniel did, slowly, like a man being generous. You think I'm the head, he said, almost pitying. But I'm just a hand. The head sits at your table, eats your food, nods at your speeches, and counts your money. You rest a hand. The head hires another. Outside, tires crackled on gravel. Inside, the greenhouse, lights hummed like a chorus holding its breath before the note. Maya's face didn't change. She looked past the glass, past the man, into the neatly staked rows of new-cutting small futures lined up under warmth and glass. You tried to scare a child, she said. Hands don't do that on their own. Heads tell them where to reach. Daniel tilted his chin, a man pleased by the intelligence of the person he'd come to hurt. Tell me, he said softly, to Gregory and to Maya and to whatever they were building with their stubborn, ordinary courage. When the head comes up for air, will you still be able to breathe? Javier's key hit the outer lock to the greenhouse's service door with a good, honest clack. Detective Carmichael lifted her radio and said the phrase that turns a trap into an address. The night tightened one last inch around the glass house, then split as the door swung and officers came in low and precise. Daniel didn't run. He only kept his eyes on Maya as if he needed to remember the face of the person who had turned the story into a wall. They cuffed him without theatrics and read him words he pretended not to hear. As they let him out, he twisted enough to throw one last sentence back at the house that had refused to be eaten. Sleep while you can, he said, teeth showing now. Morning will have a different name for who betrayed you. Day broke like a verdict none of them had asked for. Fog clung to the lower slopes, and by 8 the driveway flashed with black paint and quiet power. Gregory dressed without a tie and let the elevator to the 6th to 2nd floor be the only piece of theater he allowed himself. The lobby of Langston Enterprises smelled like eucalyptus and marble, the kind of clean that erases fingerprints but never history. People watched him pretending not to, their eyes like shutters opening and closing without sound. Maya stepped out beside him, navy suit, hair braided close, clipboard under her arm. She didn't look like a maid. She looked like a woman who'd learn how to carry herself when people would rather carry a story about her. They'll expect contrition, she said softly. Give them clarity. I can do that, he said. He wasn't sure, but saying it made the ground hold. In the boardroom, glass walls made the city look small and the table looked like a runway for old decisions. 12 seats, 11 fill. Russell Whitaker sat at the far end like a coin minted on an earlier version of the company's silver hair. Tailored grin, eyes that flattered and cut within a single blink. He stood to greet Gregory, smile set to benevolent. We were worried, he said, as if his concern could baptize the room. We're finished being worried, Gregory replied. We came here to end it. Detective Carmichael was already present, plain clothes, her badge folded neatly in her wallet like a quiet engine. She set folders in front of the board members without flourish. Bank wires from a Delaware shell to Daniel Reyes. Dates stamped in the months when gossip first found the vineyard. IP logs tying anonymous emails to the press to a home network. In Presidio Heights, GPS pings from a burner phone matched against the night of the fire by the north fence. Whitaker didn't reach for the papers. He watched the room watch him. This is preposterous, he said finally, voice pitched to land. In the moderate center, anyone can mock up PDFs. These were authenticated by a federal forensic lab, Carmichael said, not unkindly. The bank has already frozen the accounts. A small muscle jumped in Whitaker's cheek. I served this company for 20 years and tried to gut it when the widow told you no, Gregory said, the memory coming back like heat through glass. You called my wife too idealistic for insisting on controls. You tried to go around her. She wrote me notes I didn't read. That ends today. What ends today is this farce, Whitaker said, pushing his chair back. The legs whispered against the floor like a threat. I'll be discussing defamation with counsel. You can discuss it from the station bench, Carmichael said. Mr. Whitaker, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, arson, in the commission of a felony, criminal harassment, and endangerment of a minor. The room inhaled as officers stepped through the glass door, without drama, and gave him the cuffs. Like an offer he couldn't refuse, he kept his head high while they read the rights he'd always thought were for other men. He turned once in the doorway and smiled at Gregory with all his old charm. You'll bleed without me, then I'll bleed, Gregory said, and meant every word. The door closed. You could feel the building shift, something rotten lifting at the root. The press conference was held at noon in the Rose Garden, where love had been both memory and microphone. Cameras breathed like animals. Gregory wore charcoal. Maya wore navy and the truth. He read from a paper he didn't need. Individuals we trusted betrayed that trust. They tried to turn our home into a spectacle and our lives into leverage. They failed because people stood when it counted. Maya stepped forward when a reporter shouted the question he'd known would come. Why didn't you go to police immediately? We did, she said. Justice doesn't always sprint. Sometimes it walks in on sore feet and holds the line anyway. We built our path with small truths. Another voice. What do you say to those who underestimated you? Maya glanced down at the roses, then back up. People underestimate what they refuse to see. She said, that is not our problem to fix. Our job is to keep saving the child, keep telling the truth, and keep our doors open to daylight. The cameras ate it. Daylight did the dot by late afternoon. The vans thinned. The garden exhaled. The staff moved like people relearning their bodies. It would have been easy to mistake the lull for the end of it. But Maya couldn't unknot the ring of bruising that had flowered on Isabel's shoulder. Things don't bruise in clean circles unless something is circular and strong and wrong. Start with the pull, she said to Gregory in the study. The invoices again spread like a confession that had finally learned the language for itself. Start with what changed. He pointed to a service call that had looked innocent enough at 2 a.m. Lighthousing maintenance. Countersigned by a subcontractor who didn't usually touch their property. The maintenance schedule didn't call for it. The time didn't make sense. The coin battery in his drawer made it make all the sense he didn't want. Eleanor arrived with twilight in her hair and a folder under her arm. She hugged him without ceremony and then hugged Maya, surprising herself with how natural that felt. I should have been here sooner, she said, and they both told her she was here now. She set the folder on the table, and for once paper. Didn't feel like something sharp. Marissa wrote this the week she had the new ladder installed. She said, when she was anxious, she hid things near water. It made her feel like she could baptize the truth before it broke. Maya's eyes moved to the pool deck as if the stones might answer. Ladder, she said, not lights. Ladders have plates. Javier found the pump in the pool shed and ran the hose until the water line sank a hand's width. And then too, Gregory rolled up his sleeves and knelt at the ladder closest to where Isabel had slipped. The plate at the base of the second rung was secured with 4 stainless screws. It looked ordinary and expensive. Maya lay flat on the stone, arm extended into the cold, and her fingers found the seam. Needle nose, she said to no one in particular, and Javier placed the pliers in her wet hand as if he'd been waiting his whole life to be useful at something that mattered more than vines. The first screw fought and gave. The second spun, too easily. The third held as if pride were a property of steel. She worked until her palm ached and her sweatshirt sleeve wicked water to her elbow. The plate finally loosened. Gregory took the edge and lifted. Beneath it, in the dark square, where metal met tile, something glinted dully epoxy like yellowed sap sealing a small rectangular shape into the throat of the ladder housing. Don't pry, Maya said. Breathing shallow, but sure. Cut around it. Javier muttered something in Spanish that was half prayer, half instruction, and ran for a utility knife. They scored the epoxy in patient bites, easing it back without cracking the thing it guarded. When it came free, it stuck to Maya's fingers with a wet sound like a bandage letting go. She lifted it out and set it on a towel. A flash drive, black, unmarked. Its end pitted from sitting in water that wasn't supposed to hold anything but blue. Marissa, Eleanor whispered, not a question. A mother knows how the dead leave breadcrumbs. They didn't rush it. They dried it in a basin of uncooked rice Rosa produced like a magician. And they waited the longest 20 minutes of a life measured in waiting. In the study, Gregory sat a laptop on the desk and stared at his reflection in the dark screen. Maya stood behind his shoulder, hand on the chair not touching him, but touching the moment. Eleanor took the other side, one palm flat on the wood, as if she could keep the whole house from tipping. When the drive slid and it felt like a key turning. The screen blinked, thought, offered a list that was not a list, but a single file, no name. Just a timestamp from a season that smelled like apricots and sunscreen in the last month. Marissa had been alive. Gregory clicked. Static breathed, then cleared. Marissa's face filled the monitor in a wash of grainy light. She wasn't made up. Her hair was pulled back like she brushed it with her fingers. and her eyes were red underneath, not from crying, but from the kind of tiredness that tells the truth better than words. "If you're seeing this," she said, voice steadying, as she reached toward the camera and found herself in it, "then the truth got too heavy for you to carry alone." She exhaled and smiled, and the smile hurt and healed in the same beat. "Gregory." He reached for the pause key and didn't press it. Outside, a bird lifted from the lemon tree, the way it had when the briefcase fell on the first day of this story. Inside, the pool water ticked against the tile, lower now, as if it had been listening and had decided to tell them what it had kept. The video waited, its next second hanging like a held breath, somewhere beneath the surface of a truth that had been engineered to drown them. Something else was about to break free. Marissa looked straight into the cheap lens and made it gentler just by being there. "If you're seeing this," she said, "then the truth got too heavy to carry alone." The corners of her mouth tilted like she was about to apologize for something she hadn't done. "Gregory, you'll want to fix this with control. Don't fix it with love and with light." She glanced aside, reading notes we couldn't see. Russell came by again. "He wants the trust less fussy. Said investors prefer speed over locks. When I said our daughter's future is not a liquidity event." He laughed. 2 days later, the main drain seized while I was skimming leaves. Not a lot, just long enough to make me drop the net and grab the ladder. It felt like a hand closing and letting go. "The service company swears the anti-entrapment cover meets code." Maybe it does. Code can be a door a clever thief walks through. She leaned closer, the image blooming with pixel grain. "If something happens to me, look to the roses." I hid what I couldn't say there because the garden listens. "And this part you won't like. I met a young woman at St. Bridget's a few months ago. She had the kind of steadiness that makes rooms honest. Her name is Maya Williams. If you're lost, let her help you find the ground." She paused, searching her own face for permission, and found it. "Please, love, choose people over appearance. Choose the child over the company. The rest can be rebuilt." The picture jerked, a thumb brushing the lens, and then with black dot no one spoke. The laptop fan made a small, embarrassed sound. Outside, rain began again, softer this time, like the house was being told to breathe. Detective Carmichael broke the quiet without breaking it. "We need a pool engineer," she said, already dialing, "and a warrant for service logs, internal, and subcontractor." She looked to Maya and nodded once, not as thanks but as recognition. By mid-afternoon, a man in a canvas jacket and boots clean from the ankles up was lying belly flat on the flagstone, elbow deep where the light housing met tile. "You ever pull the fixture?" he asked Javier, who shook his head. Nobody should have without a full drain, which means if they did it dirty. The housing came free with a burp of water. Inside, the engineer's light caught a tangle that should have been simple. "Huh," he said. "The sound men make when the universe confirms their worst suspicion." He angled the beam. "That's a miniature servo, wireless receiver piggybacked on a board. Someone drilled the conduit and tucked it behind the fixture. When the receiver wakes, it pivots a flap and the line restricts return flow. Not enough to hurt you on a normal day. Enough to spike suction for a few breaths if you're near the main drain. Enough to give a little girl a bruise in a perfect ring." He looked up at Gregory. "That battery you found would keep this alive months." Carmichael's tech bag came open like a field surgeon's roll. Photos, swabs, careful gloved hands. "The timing?" Gregory asked, not recognizing his own voice. "Easy," the engineer said. "There's a logger." He tapped the board. "People love to time things. They forget time leaves footprints. Give me an hour. I'll tell you when it woke and slept." They gave him to, in that span. Eleanor made soup no one finished. Isabel built a city of blocks at Maya's feet and asked if the rain could drown a house. "Only if a house forgets how to breathe," Maya said, and Isabel nodded, satisfied by the kind of answer that works even when you're grown. The engineer returned with numbers printed on hospital white paper. Activation window yesterday at 1:12 p.m. again at 1:59 during the test cycle. First wake event logged 3 nights ago at 2:19 a.m. He handed Carmichael a list of serials like a confession. "You can source the board from any bare-bones kit. The servo's a little specialized. The bull signature is the tell. It's not custom, it's lazy clever." Carmichael's phone chimed. She read, then looked at Gregory with the kind of expression that turns a ceiling into sky. "We pulled the service order chain," she said. "The light housing maintenance wasn't entered by the pool vendor. It was uploaded through your facility's portal by a login belonging to your CFO. The authorization pushed to a subcontractor that doesn't usually touch a state's one, that lives in Russell's orbit. The IP for the authorization traces to a lake house in Marin. Gregory closed his eyes. Clive Harding had sent flowers when Marissa died. White lilies that made the whole foyer smell like the idea of grief. They'd built a decade of earnings calls together, jokes about the market's moves. A language of margins. He opened his eyes and found the steady light too bright for how small he suddenly felt. Is he in the city? Carmichael asked. His office, Gregory said. He didn't look at Maya, but he felt her see him see the part of a man that wants to punish himself for who he trusted. The arrest didn't happen in drama. It happened in paperwork and shoes that didn't scuff. Harding tried to leave by the service elevator with a leather weekender that couldn't fit the thing he had broken. The officers took him just as the doors closed, and later, when Carmichael sent the photo for records a man who had chosen safety and found a smaller life, instead Gregory felt no victory. Only accuracy died by dusk. The house had a new sound. Isabel laughing again, the rare kind that takes the hands to hold. She sat at the kitchen table coloring a trellis with fat green strokes, while Rosa told a story about Marissa once burning a tart and laughing so hard she cried. Eleanor listened and let herself be warmed. Javier came in with dirt on his knees and handed Maya a small metal stub. The microphone's anchor from the rose bed. For your box, he said, shy. So you remember what you beat. They ate under the trellis with blankets on their legs and candles caught in jars. The roses were wet enough to look Maid. When plates were pushed back and the last of the rain found a gutter, Gregory stood. He didn't clink a glass. He didn't read notes. I built this place like a fortress, he said. And a fortress teaches you to love walls. Marissa tried to teach me to love what walls protect. He looked at Maya. Not away. I didn't thank you when it cost you the most. I saw what I feared and called it you. That won't happen again. She didn't rescue him from the silence. He had to earn his way through it. I can make the money safe, he went on, the honesty loosening something essential in his voice. I can file charges, fire men, fix locks. But when the room goes quiet, what Isabel needs is not a ledger. It's a person whose first instinct is to jump. The court calls it guardianship. I call it what Marissa asked me to do. Trust. He swallowed. I want you beside me for her. Not as staff, not hidden, visible, equal. If you say no, I'll understand and I'll thank you just the same. When moved the candle flame sideways and put it back, Maya's throat worked once and then steadied. I won't be your shield against gossip, she said. I won't be an apology you walk around with when the room expects you to flatter. The old way of doing things. I'm not asking for an apology, he said. I'm asking for a life. She looked at Isabel, who had colored the trellis to green, as children do when they believe in too much sunlight. She looked at Eleanor, who nodded the way women nod when they see the thread their sister threw from the other side. She looked at the garden where a microphone had pretended to be a memory. Then she looked back at Gregory. I don't want to be exceptional, she said. I want what's right to be normal. For her, for other girls who look like me and don't. She drew a breath, and it made the candle flicker. Yes, for Isabel, and for what comes after. What comes after? Eleanor asked, smiling even before the answer. A place, Maya said, here in Napa. Not a charity, a promise. A center where women who hold other people's houses together can learn how to hold their own. Classes, legal clinics, night care so a mother can go do an interview. A garden. We'll call it the trellis. Let girls grow without bending to fit. Gregory's answer was the easiest he had ever given. I'll fund it, he said. And for once the money was light. It didn't end with toasts. It never does. It ended that night with ordinary things. Isabel brushing her teeth while Maya waited in the hall. A rinse cup thunking on porcelain like a bell. Eleanor folding napkins because hands want to keep loving when their mouths are tired. Javier checking locks he knew already held. After lights out, Maya stood in the doorway of Isabel's room and watched the small chest rise and fall. The penguin's beak pressed to a cheek still damp from laughter. Gregory joined her quietly. He looked older and younger and exactly the age of a man who had been asked to start over. She sleeps easier when you're here, he said. She sleeps easier when the truth is loud. Maya replied. They walked a long way back to the study, through the garden that had forgiven them without saying so. The night had cleared. stars shockingly bright as if some hand had polished them while the rain worked the leaves. Gregory set the microphone's anchor, the coin cell, and the ruined servo board in a small wooden box beside the flash drive. He added the rose note in Marissa's hand. He closed the lid and rested his palm on it. "We bury it tomorrow?" he asked. "We plant it," Maya corrected. "There's a difference." He smiled. "Under the old trellis? Where it can listen," she said. They stood for a while, not talking. From the den, a clock struck a clean single note. In the distance, a coyote called and something softer answered. The house exhaled. A long, slow release like a lung after a swim. Gregory looked up. "Do you think she can see us?" he asked, and Maya knew he meant to women at once. "I think she never stopped," Maya said, "and I think she likes the view." On the table near the window, Isabel's drawing from that afternoon lay drying. A father, a woman with a braid, a child under a trellis, all holding hands. Above them, a scatter of stars that looked like eyes. The pool outside had returned to glass, the kind that reflects without lying. Somewhere under the ladder, a square of epoxy still tacky traced where a secret had once lived and then gone to seed. Morning would come with paperwork and headlines and 1,000 small aftershocks. But the house had learned how to breathe again, and the truth, heavy and singing, had found its way to the surface and decided to stay.